So superhero movies are all the thing, right? It's just,
Wow, way to be up with the times there.
Yeah.
What's this you say?
Well, yeah, and there's a new one, though, that's coming out next April, but the trailer just dropped, and it's called The New Mutants.
Is this X-Men?
Yes, it's connected to the X-Men. And so I remember when the comic book came out, I was a kid. And these are the new teenage X-Men. And the cool thing about the New Mutants is that they weren't out saving the world yet. It was really all about them learning how to control these mutant powers that had just recently kind of come to the surface. They'd been sent off to Professor X's school. Right. And they were going to learn how to control this and either re-enter society if they chose to, or be a superhero if that's what they wanted to do.
Okay, let's talk about their trailer, though.
Yeah, so one of the young women who was sent there in the New Mutants, even in the comic book back in the day, her code name, her superhero name, was Psyche. And Psyche's power, which she had not learned to control yet, was that when she met somebody, she would tap into whatever their greatest fear was, and they would start hallucinating their greatest fear. Wow. And everybody could see it. It wasn't... Harsh. Yeah. And so it sucks not to be able to control that, right? Because everyone you meet basically is confronted with their greatest fear, and they naturally hate you. So that was her. She was having a hard time fitting in the new school. Okay. This new trailer.
I didn't get any of that on this new trailer.
Holy shit.
I just want to say, first here, okay, a couple of things.
Yep.
One, Marvel is just so outdistancing DC. It's not even funny in the comic.
It's true.
Okay, they just are.
It's true.
And here's why I think this one just adds to that, is that, A, they are tapping into what horror is a big thing right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Horror's always been a big thing.
It is, but it's like everything. It comes in waves as far as how popular it is.
I think the quality comes in waves, but I think there's always people out there who want a scary movie.
And I agree with that, but sometimes things will be trendier, like Friday the 13th and Halloween. Yeah. They're rebooting Friday the 13th. Mm-mm. Okay, whatever. The trailer is horror movie. It looks it has those flashes of the light comes on, it goes off, that kind of thing that happens. It has the font of a horror movie. If it
wasn't for the Marvel logo in the middle of it, you wouldn't really know you're in a superhero movie at all.
It is a horror movie.
Yes.
It kind of like a haunted house. They mentioned that, and that's kind of the vibe you get. Mm-hmm. It's mentioned that they have powers that they can't control, and that's why they're there. But it's not like the old 10 years ago, the X-Men stuff. Yeah. Even when they rebooted, it was more of a superhero.
Sure. Off to save the world.
This had Pink Floyd's in the background. Yeah. In a really haunted, we don't need no age. It's that one.
But echoey and weird and slower and creepy. Yeah. It is set, and there is no, the villain, if there is one, are the people who are, taking these kids in and trying to teach them to control, but it's almost themselves. Like they are their own worst enemies.
We don't know from that.
Yeah.
It looks like it might be the actual washer and dryer are the enemies. I walked away with that.
Yeah, that's my enemy in life is the laundry, really. So let's just take that.
Where does that other sock go?
When the chaos of popular culture makes your brain hurt, you really need belief in the form of a transfusion of analysis and humor. It's time for a Poperation. Join hosts Eric and Stacey as they dissect popular culture one bloody organ at a time. It's just what the doctor ordered.
Okay, so all the Christmas decorations are up at Target, so
Shut up now. Shut up now.
So what we know about this is it's Halloween.
No, stop. Because what I will say to you is when the Christmas decorations go up, that means it's back to fucking school time. And this is a rant, but I won't go on it. I'll give you a preview. I'm hating that. Don't put your damn flocked trees next to the backpacks. Shut up. But yes, you're right. It is Halloween time because...
In fact, it's Halloween today.
We already got the fucking Valentine's Day shit out.
Yeah.
So, see, you made me mad. You made me mad right off the bat. I actually do like Halloween. Halloween a lot. I like Halloween a lot.
Halloween's fun.
It's Halloween time.
It's Halloween time.
Not to be confused with Halloween Town, which is a Disney series that Debbie Reynolds was in. You're welcome.
I can always count on you. Random Disney, fun facts.
I know.
Happy Halloween, everyone, to start off with. That was good.
Thank you.
Very good.
Scooby-Doo list. So we're going to talk about one particular monster today because it is everywhere and everybody knows about them. And everybody that's not true. Not everybody likes them.
Not everybody likes them. I like them. Vampires are probably my favorite of the, if you put monsters into categories, I'm into vampires. Mm-hmm. And, for me, it's that they're scary. The idea of a vampire is scary. This idea about something that will suck your blood out of your neck and potentially kill you, or if they decide to be really devious, turn you into a monster yourself. That idea is scary. And vampires are really super sexy.
Some are.
They can be. If
you go back in the day, Dracula, which is a novel by Bram Stoker, 1897. But there was a movie, the first movie was in 1921.
Yep.
Called Dracula's Dream. But the one that everybody knows was in 1922 called Nosferatu. Have you ever seen it?
No.
That is not a sexy Dracula. It is a horror-able Dracula. I say it that way, which is incorrect. I say it that way because it's like truly a horror kind of Dracula as opposed to I'm a sexy guy, whatever. But what's interesting, so Nosferatu, because I was reading about this because I like it a lot. You watch Nosferatu, it's scary as crap, even over 100 years later. It's a silent movie, and Dracula, the vampire, was a monster. He was a monster. He looks like a monster. Ain't nobody falling in love with that. Okay? And he's scary and he's mean and he doesn't do nice things. But here's a fun fact that I didn't know. So Nosferatu came out in 1922. Controversial.
How so?
I'll tell you. It was accused of plagiarizing the book Dracula by none other than Mrs. Stoker, Bram Stoker's wife. So what happened, fun fact, so she sued because of this, and she wanted all of the movies destroyed. She lost here. In Germany, she won. And so they went and they destroyed all of the known copies. And she spent the rest of her life going around the world finding copies of Nosferatu and burning them.
We don't like her.
That's a documentary. I mean, that's like real. That's what really happened. I feel sorry for her because that's what she ended up doing. I mean, that just seems like an awful goal in your life.
Yeah.
But I sat there and I'm thinking, okay, and if I were in that position, you sue to get some money. She never got the money. But destroying them, people worked hard. People who had no ill intentions toward you or your husband. And, actors and stuff. And I'm like, don't destroy it. Don't destroy history.
Yeah.
I had a hard problem with that.
To the best of my knowledge, Bram Stoker did not invent the vampire.
No, he just put it in that form.
He created a character, Count Dracula, in that storyline. Now, Dracula, I've read the book. Have you read the book?
Yes, but very long time ago.
Yeah, I kind of
hard to read.
Yeah, it's not an easy read. It's amazing that this particular work has inspired so many people to create so many. If
it came out now, I don't know that it would be as popular the way it's written.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's because nobody had anything else to do, so you've got time to read that.
So I don't remember it's all in letters. Epistological, I think, fiction is the word that I think I was reaching for. So it's all done in letters and it's all very formally written. And so it's hard it's hard to really be scary about it. There's no, and suddenly she turned and, there was a man in her dun, dun, dun. There was none of that kind of a thing going on. But it is kind of low grade creepy because little clues are kind of laid in and out. And I guess what I mean by sexy is that Count Dracula, when he meets these people at his castle in Transylvania, can carry on enlightened, intelligent conversations with them.
Lugosi's, yes.
Yeah. And so that's kind of our notion of vampires as a monster. Really, Dracula was kind of the birth of this phenomenon. I mean, Bram Stoker didn't create the idea of a vampire.
No. They'd been around.
But which is why, not having seen Nosferatu, I think Mrs. Stoker might have been full of shit, because Nosferatu does not sound like anything like her husband's creation.
Storylines that were in there. Now, what I will tell you that Nosferatu did, aside from that weird little asterisk with Mrs. Stoker, Nosferatu, not Dracula, not the book, not Bram Stoker's.
Okay.
Nosferatu on its own was the first to introduce the idea that the sun will kill a vampire, because Bela Lugosi's walked around in the sun.
Yeah.
But Nosferatu is the one who did that when the sun hit, it burned. So, thank you, Nosferatu.
Okay, so Nosferatu put a little in our what we know about vampire lore.
But you're right. Who made it sexy? The first person was Bela Lugosi.
Yeah.
Because he was just this very, you look at him now and you go, that's not Pitt. That's not sexy. But he's not a Hemsworth.
Listen to the music of the night and that whole,
But the idea was he didn't look, Nosferatu looks like a monster. He's got these pointed ears and this elongated face, and he's pale, and he looks like a monster.
Yeah, scary.
Bella looks like a person.
Yeah.
And thus...
a pale person with a widow's peak, and,
but he's wearing a nice cape.
Exactly.
And nice clothes. He speaks well.
Yep.
With an accent. But, I mean, that he was able to assimilate, if you will, whereas the Nosferatu monster doesn't. So I think the ones that are sexy are the ones that assimilate the most.
Yeah.
And when we look at the books and the movies, that...
Yeah, and the original storyline, which gets lost in a lot of these, translations, because not the best story really ever written. But Mina and Lucy are these two, women who are brought to his castle, and Lucy, I think, is turned at some point into a vampire herself. And there is this kind of dark side sexual liberation kind of thing that goes, because Lucy's a buttoned up, nice girl. And then she gets turned into a vampire, and then she's just, she's a monster.
Yep.
She's bloodthirsty. But it's this idea that inside of all of us, isn't there this person or this kind of energy that isn't really connected to our morality, and just, is something in us being freed when we become this, when we get turned into this monster.
It's a little different. Speaking of monsters, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing.
Yep.
Whereas this is something that permanently changes you to this alter ego.
Yep.
But it just changes you. So it's not an alter ego at that point. It just changed your personality. But there was also, even then, subtle as it was, this sexual threat there. There is an intimacy with Dracula coming on your neck, coming to your neck and biting you there.
Yep.
Got to be close to do that. And it's intimate. And then the idea of taking some of your life fluidity stuff. I don't mean to get scatological here, but you know what I'm saying?
We're talking about bodily fluids is what we're talking about.
And thus, what comes to mind is going to be sex.
And so many times that I've seen, vampires in pop culture, it's like you approach the neck and the fangs come out, right? And they enter your neck really slowly. And sometimes there's this look on the person's face as they are being attacked, really, but it looks a little bit like sexual pleasure, and then when they start to kind of suck the blood out of you, it's just, there's this, it's presented like sex a lot.
Which I think back in the day, because you couldn't put sex in the movies or on TV.
Exactly.
And at this point, movies, there was no TV. That's as close as you could get. And so it was a seduction. But you're like, no, but that's blood.
Yeah.
And those are fangs. It's not anything else lower on the extremities.
But it's still, and, just because we're going there, and why not?
Let's.
It's a form of penetration.
Yes, it is.
And so it's very sexual. And if you compare it, you
are getting some of their blood too.
Yes. So
there's an exchange of bodily fluids.
Anne Rice was the one who kind of introduced that to me. We're going to talk about Anne Rice in a little bit. The idea that if you just want to kill somebody, you just suck so much blood out of their system that they can no longer live, and then there's a dead body there. If you want to turn somebody, and the way that Anne Rice did this was also really sexy as well, the vampire would would bite their own wrist,
Correct.
they would start to bleed. And
Correct.
as they were feeding off the person, they would feed them
Yes.
the blood coming out of their wrist. And there was this, circular...
There's a bond that connects them now, but also there is suddenly you now have the same virus or whatever that I have, kind of thing.
Yep. So there's a lot of connections between vampires and sexy time.
Well, and I think that's the whole point. Is certainly as movies got older, that was what you wanted. Christopher Lee, nice looking man.
Yeah.
And he was much better looking than Bela Lugosi.
Yeah, he played Dracula 9 times. Between 1958
nice paycheck, Chris.
and 1976. He milked that role for all it was.
No pun intended. He sucked that role dry. He did.
See what you did there?
I see, yeah.
I do. That's all right. Yeah, it's pretty good. Words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have all the best. But here's the thing, that in the 60s, when he started between 1958 and 1976, there were a lot of other Dracula movie things that came out as well during that time. And they were all, at that point, I think, so Christopher Lee took his look off of Bela Lugosi. I think after that, everybody, until the 21st century, was taking their look off of Christopher Lee. It was that black suit with the cape with maybe the red satin lining. That was who...
That's who Dracula was for us. Yeah, in a lot of ways.
My favorite.
Who was that?
My favorite, George Hamilton.
Love at First Bite. I remember that. Susan St. James.
Yes, with blonde hair.
Yes.
I loved that movie. I thought it was adorable.
It was funny.
It was a movie that knew who it was. It was not trying to be this serious, dramatic thing. It was a vampire movie. George Hamilton knows how to laugh at himself.
Yes.
And this was him doing it. And, of course, he's just a good-looking guy.
He is. He's very sexy, yeah.
Still is. And so it was like a perfect role for him. I thought that was one of the most hysterical and one of the most successful for me. I just enjoyed that movie from beginning to end.
Yeah.
I do have a least favorite. Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman's a great actor.
I'm not even contesting that at all.
No. And I know you're not. But I say that just to say that Francis Ford Coppola's 1992 film version of Dracula was just a series of bizarre choices.
Well, okay, so Dracula is based off of Vlad the Impaler. Okay, who was a real person. And the reputation Vlad had was, and why he was called the Impaler, is that he was one of the warlords over there.
Yep.
There were lots of them. He was one of them. And he would chop heads off, and he'd put them on pikes. Again, not a new thing, but he did it a lot. He was very, very violent. So he had a reputation. And as stories grow, as they did over there in Transylvania and Prussia and all those places, the villagers would talk and the stories would get better and better and bigger and bigger. And the idea was, well, he would cut their heads off and drink their blood. He then became the boogeyman that people would scare their children. You got to go to bed or Vlad's going to get you. Kind of thing. So that is part of Bram Stoker's muse, if you will, was Vlad.
Okay.
What I feel they tried to do in this 1992 version is kind of hearken to that a little bit.
Okay.
And I just didn't. My biggest problem was the makeup. And maybe it's because I like George Hamilton and Gary Oldman in the makeup with the whole. I just hated it so much, but I didn't enjoy the story.
Yeah, they tried to do something which I don't think was in the book. I don't remember it from the book when I read it. This whole idea that for centuries Dracula has been pining after his long lost love, who looked like Winona Ryder back in the 1400s,
Dracula was in love with Mina, and
here comes Winona Ryder in the the late 1800s, 1900s, 1800s, and looks just like this woman that he loved when he was human. And that's why he's, and this idea that for centuries Dracula has just been lovelorn, and that's really his problem, is that he's been unsatisfied somehow. And I think that gave Dracula too much of a soul. really. I mean, the whole point of vampires for a lot of folks is that, again, it's like when Lucy turns and she becomes this like bloodthirsty animal, there's something human that's missing from you now.
She is no longer human, and thus it's kill her and you're fine. You're not going to lose any sleep.
Yeah.
If she's a monster now, she's not human.
Yes. And this idea that vampires have this piece of ethics, humanity, you might call it a soul, whatever it is, it's just missing from you. And now you are literally a cold-blooded killer. Right. And that's what you are. And so trying to turn it into, and so was Dracula in love with Mina, or did he just want to possess her?
Correct.
You know, it was, I think I prefer the interpretation that doesn't give him too much of a soul. You know, a vampire in that story to me, is a monster, is a killing machine. Yes. And you fear them. And the whole point is, this is evil, and we want to put a crucifix in front of your face so that you'll shrink back into nothing, and that you'll, put you into the sunlight and you'll burn to a crisp and die. And that's a satisfying ending to a vampire movie. People have played with the idea of vampires. People have created, and we'll talk about a lot of them more sympathetic vampires, people who are caught in this place.
What they've done is they've created new backstories and histories for where vampires come from and why they exist. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we'll talk about that coming up.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about all kinds of vamps. We started with Dracula. Before we take a break, one more that I want to throw in there, another big kind of is Lestat, right? Which Anne Rice created.
Do you remember when this hit the world? I mean, it was huge. Anne Rice. You say Anne Rice, everybody knows who that is.
Yeah.
That's Lestat. That is the vampires. That is New Orleans. Uh-huh. That is everything that is that dark but sexy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very sexy.
Her vampire storyline, very different.
Yes. Now, I was 5 years old when the first Lestat book came out, 1976.
Right. I was older, but I wasn't aware of her until right before the movies came out.
Okay.
The movie came out. Right before that came out, suddenly her books were freaking everywhere.
Yep.
And everybody was reading them. And they said, oh, and they're making a movie with Tom Cruise. And at the time, I remember everybody going,
really? Yeah. That seemed an odd choice.
Okay.
Brad Pitt didn't seem as crazy.
No, that actually kind of made a little bit more sense.
That seemed to make sense. Tom Cruise is actually, I'd say he's pretty good in this movie.
He was fine in it. In the end, he was fine. It was a disturbing, it had a lot of disturbing things that were supposed to be disturbing about it.
Yeah.
The most disturbing for me was little baby Kirsten Dunst.
Yes. So this idea that So in Interview with the Vampire was the first Lestat novel. It came out in 1976. Neil Jordan directed the film in 1994. Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, and little Kirsten Dunst. And this idea that they took this child, and how old was she when she made this movie? 8 or 9?
Probably in real life, she was more like 10 or 12.
Okay.
But the child itself, I think, was like 8, 6 or 8.
So they turned a little girl into a vampire, basically so they could have this little pet.
So then what you have done, though, you have stuck she's stuck at that age she's stuck looking
in that body.
Age in that body for frickin'
But now she's immortal. She's immortal as a vampire.
As an 8-year-old. Dear God, if, children wouldn't last past 8 if a parent thought that they weren't ever going to grow out of it. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, she's such an obnoxious brat. Yeah, but she'll get older.
Well, but what's cool about this character, though, I mean, yes, it's a horrible thing to do to a child.
For a long time, and there was her maturity level took longer to evolve.
Yes, but eventually she became this woman who'd lived. I call her a woman because she'd been alive for hundreds of years, but could turn on this 8-year-old little waify. Oh, sir, I'm lost. Yes. And the fangs come out. I mean, it was
disturbing to watch her.
That is so scary. The idea that this little child that just seems like the safest thing in the world, that you immediately feel so much sensitivity towards, and then all of a sudden fangs come out and she kills you.
Here's what was weird also for me is that looking at that, I wondered if as a parent I would have let my daughter do that role, because it's again, somebody was going to play it. Don't get me wrong. I get that they were going to get a child actress to play it. Mm-hmm. But these children, she wasn't really 100 years old.
No,
she really was.
She was a child.
Little girl saying these things. And It was a weird thing for me because I remember having that moment of moral quandary going, would I have said, yes, little Kirsten, you can do this?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. She was great.
Audition at Disney.
She was great. I mean, I'll say right away, she was amazing. And I would just say,
career after.
Yeah.
Because sometimes kids get stuck in things like that. They get pigeonholed.
Yeah. Well, there aren't too many roles for a 100-year-old woman in an 8-year-old body.
You just that's not what I meant.
I know. But
Stop making me
I'm having a little fun here. But film sets, I think they can be very artificial. So even though, these things are happening and the score makes it scarier, the lighting ends up making it scarier. You can just say, okay, you set someone up and say, these are the 2 lines you need to say in this particular take, and that's it. Right. A little kid might not even have a sense of how the whole scene is being played out. And so who knows? I don't know if she was. It'd be interesting to ask her. It'd be interesting to ask her now, as an adult who's still working in the industry. It's like, what do you... How did that affect you? Yeah,
how did that affect you?
But also, Queen of the Damned was another Lestat novel that ended up becoming a movie.
It was not as embraced as a movie.
No.
As Interview was. I think that people who were... Because Anne Rice fans who read her books are rabid.
Yes.
So if you're going to do a movie off her book, you better do it right. Because they will come after you with fangs.
But also, see what you did there. But also, for people who are not huge fans of the books. Now, I read an Anne Rice novel, The Witching Hour. It was not part of this Lestat series, but it was about witches, obviously, which might be our episode next Halloween. We might do a thing about witches, because there's a lot to get into there, too. Lestat, at this point in the 12-novel saga, this was taking place in modern day, and so it was not a period piece, and so it was very different. I mean, between Interview with the Vampire and this one, they had the same name, but they might not have even felt like they belonged in the same universe, because all of a sudden, this one's taking place in modern day, and Lestat is a heavy metal rock star. Mm-hmm. Like which you think about it, what a perfect thing for a vampire to do, right? Because you never have to appear during the daytime, and they're sexy as hell. Right. And Aaliyah, R.I.P., who died shortly after. This movie came out, was this Egyptian queen who'd been around. Yes, who'd been around since Egypt was the primary power on Earth, also a vampire, and the two of them, were having this tumultuous vampire relationship. A completely different kind of thing, but, vampire as rock star. I remember that movie came out, I heard the plot, and I went, really? That sounds dumb.
Yeah.
I just said, that sounds dumb. I've never seen it, so maybe it is, maybe it's not. Yeah. But and I don't know if Anne Rice fans appreciated the Neil Jordan movie more than they liked Queen of the Damned. I have no idea.
I don't know. I think that Queen of the Damned did not make as much money.
It didn't, but I don't think you can make a huge hit based on just that core group of readers. I think you have to appeal to people like me who've not read the 12 books.
You're exactly right.
But I want to see Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt play vampires. Right. That sounds like a fun night out, so I'll go ahead and spend my money on that one. Queen of the Damned, just speaking anecdotally, did not appeal to me as much, and maybe that sentiment was shared by a lot of moviegoers. So I didn't. Me neither.
But also, I didn't see it for very much the same thing. It's a rock star vampire. I'm just like,
just sounded dumb.
Pass.
But the novels are in the literary world are still. I mean, Anne Rice, and the last one came out in 2016.
Is she still going?
Yeah. She stopped for a while.
She did.
She found religion and then started writing books about Jesus.
Ew.
Yes. She started.
Ew.
Yes.
Anne Rice?
Yes, novelizations about the life of Christ. She got
Anne Rice?
Yes.
Boy, I missed this.
All into that. And then just kind of came out with another vampire Lestat thing and basically decided that, this was not necessarily the other thing I read by Anne Rice was her Sleeping Beauty series. Have you read these?
No.
They're dirty books. They're erotica.
Really?
Yes, they're very dirty. They're very naughty.
Interesting.
Yeah, fun.
Okay,
fun.
I'm writing this down.
Fun stuff. So when we come back, more vamps in a minute.
You're listening to Popperation with Eric and Stacey. Take a deep breath. This may sting a little.
want to suck your blood.
How you talk.
I know. So anyway, talking about vampires, I will tell you right now.
Yes.
What we're going to talk about, my favorite. I'm a huge Buffy fan.
Yeah, we love it. We just talked about Buffy in our last show, talking about sisters.
Yes, we touched on it. But I think this was, well, first of all, I think Joss Whedon is a genius.
He's very clever.
And I liked this series. I liked it for the female empowerment. Mm-hmm. She was the hero.
Yep.
Literally of everybody.
Yep.
But it's
and second behind, if she had a sidekick that was even reached her, it was Willow.
Yes.
So it was yet another woman,
another female, and of course they had the whole gay take on that when Willow realized
and Tara
she
got
was
together. Yep.
Gay, and they went down that road.
Mm-hmm.
They went down it. They didn't just
at a time then that was not not expected.
Certainly not with your teenagers and young 20s.
Yeah.
You weren't doing that on TV.
Yeah.
Took a lot of risks and that sort of thing. But I liked the environment that Joss created. Basically, it's a story that Buffy moves to this town, and the high school is right on top of the Hellmouth.
Yeah.
So...
Well, let's back up a little bit, because first there was the 1992 movie.
Okay, we should
where
go
she
there,
was...
Which I'm probably one of 3 people who liked it. But I did like it.
I did not see the film, but I read the comic book that Joss Whedon wrote that was the origin story that was basically, he said this is his preferred, the movie got changed as he was putting it together. Okay. He was not very powerful in 1992, so he couldn't make everything about his vision stick. So he wrote this comic book that's, you can read it in a half an hour. And it's, Buffy looks exactly like Sarah Michelle Gellar in the comic, because of course Sarah Michelle played Buffy in the TV series, but Kirsty Swanson played Buffy in the movie. And it was that story of her meeting her first watcher as a young high school student in Los Angeles and burning the gym down to kill all these vampires. And in the very first episode of the TV series, when she relocates to Sunnydale, California, which sits on top of the Hellmouth, you hear about, well, aren't you the kid who burned down the gymnasium at your last school? And she's like, kind of. And so if you'd seen the film, if you'd seen the movie, that was just kind of like, okay, nod, this is, we are taking on, but putting her in a completely different context so that you don't have to see the movie in order to appreciate the TV show. You don't. You can skip it. You can skip it.
I will tell you that seeing the movie is better done with cocktails.
And snarky friends?
Yes, but here's what I'm going to say. I love Rutger Hauer, and he was the bad vampire in Buffy.
Yep.
It was Rutger Hauer not at his best weight. I'm going to be snarky there, but I love Rutger Hauer.
See, you know who I love? Donald Sutherland.
Okay, he was
as the first watcher. Yeah. So
he was great, but it was Donald Sutherland taking a paycheck. You know what I'm saying? But also Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens
pulled that out of my. You
are doing really well.
Okay,
Thanks.
lately.
So he played like the Igor. I don't know his name, but he was the assistant to
Rutger Hauer. All right. Yes, master. Master.
He gets killed at one point, and his death scene lasts like 5 minutes.
Awesome.
And I remember people loved that, and that got pulled out than anything else, because this was after the scandal after he did Pee Wee Herman's Playhouse, and then he got, he was caught in the theaters.
How quaint. He went to, as an adult, he went to go see porn in a movie theater and whipped it out and jacked off in public. That constituted a scandal.
Yes.
Now we have people literally raping other people, and people are going, well, is that permitted? Boys will be boys. Okay, all Pee Wee Herman did was jack off.
That's true.
In a porn theater. Yeah. What else are you supposed to do in a porn theater? That's what you're there for.
Yes, I don't know.
Stupid. Anyway, we love you, Pee Wee.
It was a lovely rant. But he was hysterical, is my point. But his performance got pulled out because it was so funny, especially his death scene. But
So edited out of the movie, you mean?
No. I mean, pulled out by critics.
Okay.
It's absolutely
noticed.
If you don't see this for any other reason, watch it for Paul Rubens' death scene. It's just very, very funny. Now, having said that, I liked the movie, and part of it was because I liked the characters that Josh created. So that when the TV show came on, I was certainly going to give it a shot. And it was different. It was quite different. She was a different person than the Christy Swanson one.
Because the comic book that I read, she starts off kind of Valley Girl. So
Christy
you expect...
Swanson was awful Valley Girl. It was
so you expect when you hear Buffy the Vampire Slayer, those two things seem incongruous, and that's part of the genius of what's going on.
Correct.
By the time she showed up in the TV show, Buffy was a little bit more street smart because the movie was very much her growing up and growing into this role of the Slayer.
So
she was already a Slayer when the TV show started.
This was one of those where, Dakan Belnuwan, she was the one Slayer. Every generation has one Slayer. And when they die, then another one is picked. And this Slayer goes around killing monsters.
Yep.
There are more than just vampires. So she's the vampire Slayer, but she kills more than anything. Now, what Joss did, which I thought was brilliant in the series, is basically the monsters were allegories or metaphors or whatever for other issues. And a lot of them issues that teenagers were facing. And, so in the end, Buffy would slay them.
Yep.
And the idea being that you can slay these dragons, these demons, these monsters. So a lot of times the monsters that she was dealing with were really, just symbols of something else. And that's what I thought was part of the genius.
Yeah.
The dialogue, fast-paced, sharp, just wonderful, hysterical, lots of humor, always important.
Yep.
Vampires were sexy.
Yes.
These vampires were sexy.
So let's talk about some of the vamps, because Buffy was not a vampire. She was the vampire slayer, but she was the girlfriend to two vampires throughout the course of this.
The first one was Angel, and he's a bad guy, but he was so hot. He was that broody
He wasn't
vampire.
Was he a bad guy? He wasn't a bad guy.
In the beginning, yeah.
Well,
he was a vampire. Well,
you didn't even know he was a vampire at the beginning. He was just this sexy dude.
You're right. He was actually not bad when we first meet him, because he was trying to make up for the bad. He had been bad, because when we got history of him, he was Irish guy.
Yes.
And he got turned.
He was a horrible vampire in the beginning.
He was a killer because he hung out with a vampire named Spike
and Drusilla.
And then what happened is when he decided he wanted to be good,
somehow he got a soul put back into him.
Oh, that's right. A witch cursed him.
Yes.
That's right. I remember in Ireland.
Yes. A witch cursed him. So now he had a soul. So he was the one vampire with a soul.
And
which meant that he was capable of love. He was capable of empathy. He was capable of all these things that vampires are typically not capable of. And so he really stood alone there.
Yes.
So when we meet him in the series the first time, he's just this sexy guy who thinks that Buffy's kind of cute.
Yes.
When he finds out that she's the Slayer, he's kind of appalled. And when she finds out that he's a vampire, she's really appalled because they kind of have a thing for each other. And then that became something. Now, at some point in the series, his soul was taken away from him momentarily.
It was when she lost her virginity to him.
Yes.
Because he'd fallen in love, and he knew that if and the witch had cursed him with a soul, but if he ever found complete happiness, it was going to go away.
Yeah.
So they had sex. Apparently, he found true happiness, and his soul went away and became.
Gee, I wonder the moment where he found complete happiness.
I don't know. I can't imagine. But suffice it to say, he did.
We call it evampulation.
That's nasty. So the next morning she wakes up and he's a bad dude.
Yeah.
And he's awful and he breaks her heart.
Yes.
And again, this is metaphors to girls, teenagers who fall in love and the boy treats them like shit.
Yeah.
It was...
Who only wants one thing.
Correct. And so, anyway, but he does get it back.
Yes.
Again.
Yes. He dies and then she brings him back and it gets very convoluted.
And then he gets his own series.
Yes.
Which I think lasted about 4 or 5 years. I watched that too.
I did.
Again... The vampire with a soul, and I guess that's the thing, is that we find that to be a dichotomy. And yet, that's what we like, is when the vampire has a soul.
Yeah.
And especially if they're good looking.
So now we have a vampire who's actually the hero. And you feel bad for him that he's stuck in this situation where he can't go out into the sunlight. Although the way that it worked with Angel, as long as he was in the shade, he was okay.
Correct.
So he would be out on a sunny day. It was direct sunlight would get him. There was one episode where they actually found this ring that if he wore it, he could actually sit in the sun if he wanted to. And he actually didn't didn't keep it because lots of reasons. He had reasons. But yeah, that idea that a vampire could suddenly be our hero, and then you start thinking about, so what is it to be a real person with all of your intact human memories and all of your intact humanness, but then stuck in this situation where you have to drink blood, and it's the only thing you can consume, and you can't step into the sun, and the sight of a crucifix makes you, start to die, and all kinds of, other stuff happening there. So after Angel left, he left a big hole in the show because there was something about the Slayer having a love affair with a vampire that was big to that. So there was this one character that was kind of left around who was Spike, who was always fun to watch.
He always had some of the best lines.
Yes. He had great dialogue, and he had this, white blonde hair. And when we met him, he was the lover of Drusilla, who was just Juliet Landau.
Yes.
Crazy as fuck.
Martin Landau's daughter.
Yes.
For those who are keeping track.
And you can tell. There's
totally.
I mean, this is what Martin Landau would look like if he were a pretty girl. And I'm going to say, if he were a pretty girl, she's lovely.
Yes.
But it's definitely...
She was evil, though. As a couple, they were absolutely evil.
Evil and crazy. She had some screws loose. And she played crazy well.
Yes.
Oh,
she took
my gosh.
to another level.
Yes. So they were a couple.
Yes.
And then, she broke his heart. It was like, okay, you've known her for 200 years. You're just now getting that she's crazy as hell. Come on, Spike. But, it was a show. And this is a choice I will say. I'm a huge fan. Don't agree with this.
Which one?
Buffy and Spike getting together and being a couple.
Them. I loved them.
Yeah.
I thought they were great. Because I liked him so much. And then when he found himself falling in love with her, and when he admitted it, they were all just funny moments for me. I liked them. I
was with it when he was falling in love with her, and I was with it when when he admitted it to her. Like, all of those things, I was with it. I couldn't, the way that they had been drawn for seasons now, I never believed that she
and that's
returned his affection.
At one point, it was her fighting that. So they would have angry sex.
Yep.
And then she'd be mad at him still. It was like she was angry with herself for feeling that way. Now, so it wasn't that she just turned on a dime. Joss knew that was too hard for anybody to believe. So they did draw it out. I liked it because I liked him. I liked their dialogue. I thought their back and forth banter was hysterical. I enjoyed the relationship because she would kick his ass every once in a while. And, but he kept coming back for more, and it always gave him good one-liners. He had his delivery also. Oh,
no question. These actors were fantastic.
James
Marston?
That's it.
There I go again.
Is that the same one? Anyway, that guy.
Do we need to look it up?
Nah, let it go.
Okay.
He was great. Look it up. You're seeing it yourself. But he was great.
They were great. Sarah Michelle Gellar was great. For years, I didn't watch Buffy when it was originally on. I went back and watched it sometime later. And I always was like, Sarah Michelle Gellar was always kind of looked at as pretty blonde actress. Why does no one remember? She's brilliant. She's fantastic. And why is she not working? Really?
Yeah, she's married and she does what she wants to, but she doesn't have to. She's married to Freddie Prinze Jr.
Yeah.
They're still happily married.
Okay.
Have a couple of kids.
As long as she doesn't want to, I'm cool with that.
Not. She does what she wants to do.
It's a loss though, because she's so good. She's
so good. When they first came out and they said that she'd been cast, I remembered her. She was on All My Children. She was Erica Kane's daughter.
Of course.
And I didn't watch. I mean, I knew enough, but I just didn't care for her. I didn't, and she was a brunette on that. That's her natural hair color. And I just didn't care for her. And maybe it's because it was Erica Kane's. I don't know.
Yeah.
But so she grew on me to where I'm a huge fan now.
Yeah.
But I think she was perfectly cast. But I think everybody was perfectly cast.
Yes.
But I liked the environment he created, and I liked the vampires and the history that went with them. All the monsters had nice histories that you would find out. Yep. But the vampires, it did have a lot of the same tropes as far as the sun, as you said, and being allergic to stuff. But the witty banter, just absolutely.
Yeah.
So I really liked that.
So another clever take on vampires that I really enjoyed, and I watched every single season of True Blood. on HBO.
I'd read some of the books.
Had you?
Yes. And they were good. I enjoyed them.
Mm-hmm.
I did not enjoy the series.
Really?
I didn't.
Okay.
I watched most of the first season.
Okay.
And then I was out.
Yeah, I did not read the books, so I had nothing really to compare it to. I found the setup of the series just kind of irresistible. So True Blood is spelled as you would...
HBO or Showtime?
HBO.
HBO.
It was an HBO. And True Blood was the name of the show, but it was also the name of this, in the show, this concoction, this chemical concoction that vampires could drink, and apparently didn't taste very good. Not nearly as good as the original, but it was artificial human blood. And so suddenly, with the creation of this substance, vampires could come out of the closet. Yeah. Right? So Alan Ball, who is the showrunner behind this, it was a woman who wrote the books. I don't recall her name. Charlene something? Charlene Harris. But a gay man was kind of at the helm of this show, and I could tell, the influence there already. First of all, who was, and he recently died, the actor who played Nelson Ellis, who played the short order cook.
I don't remember his name.
Yeah. But he was so great, and he was killed off early on in the book series, but they kept him, for almost the entire show because he was so great.
From the show,
I understand that. Yeah, I've heard that. But this idea of coming out. This idea of now you can announce yourself to the world and to a world who doesn't really understand you. So many things to kind of compare to the gay experience.
I mean, everything it was, you're exactly right. It was definitely it was comparable to that. So whether, whether it was on purpose, which you kind of feel like it probably was to an extent or not, they were coming against the same prejudices and hurdles.
And had a lot to do with the fight around HIV/AIDS as well, because there was idea that being a vampire was a form of a virus, right? So there's this thing that you carried that you could pass on to somebody else via intimate activity. Correct. Yes. So all of these things kind of, converging. But at the same time, I was a little. I was watching it. I was entertained by it. I was a little offended by it because I was like, okay, being gay is not like being a thing that kills people by sucking out their souls. I mean that. Come on,
Would you like to know what I was offended by the Southern accent.
Yes,
they were horrendous, and I take it seriously. If you're going to plant your whatever the hell it is in a southern state, and
Louisiana in this case,
in the bayou, okay, come on, man, don't be doing that cheap ass Steel Magnolias shit. Come on. I was so. I mean, you had a bunch of Brits, a bunch of British actors.
Yep.
And honestly, that was kind of my deal breaker on that.
Yeah. So you could read the books and you could hear these Southern accents in your head.
Because they were,
and they were real because it was words on a paper and you were creating them and you knew what they really sounded like.
And again, it was very different. There were storylines that were different and there were characters that were a little different. And so what I envisioned while I'm reading it was different than what.
Okay.
But I will tell you right now, each week, and it got harder and harder for me to watch because of those damn accents.
See, and that it didn't even occur to me.
Of course not. You're a Yankee.
So doesn't come from the South. I know nothing. Okay. Jon Snow. So, just like Buffy, True Blood seemed to center around a central female character who was not a vampire, Sookie Stackhouse, played by Anna Paquin. But there were several vampires who were prominent throughout the series. There was Bill Compton, who is Stephen Moyer, who is now her husband.
Yes.
So they met on this show. Her primary love interest. There was a romantic rival who was Eric Northman, played by Alexander Skarsgård, son of Stellan Skarsgård. Yep. And he was kind of his main rival for her affections. Tara, who is her friend, who we meet all throughout season 1, and I think at some point, either into season 2 or into season 3, she was turned against her will. She was basically killed. She was going to die. And Sookie asked, I think, Bill, she can live as a vampire if you turn her right now. And so they do. And when Tara wakes up as a vampire, she is pissed and is, and goes into a deep depression. So that actually kind of
sounds like rape.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the idea that, sex doesn't turn you into a vampire, but yes, she was
something happened to her physically that she didn't agree to.
Yes. And it was treated that way in the show.
And that's what I'm saying.
She was incredibly violated.
Yeah. That's it.
And now she has this, and what she feels like is a disease. She can't go out in the sun. Same kind of situations kind of apply. And again, the viral allegory works really well there as well. So that was an interesting story. Pam de Beaufort, who was my favorite, she was kind of Eric's sidekick, who you kind of thought, like, are they lovers? And then you get, pretty clearly as the show goes on, she's a lesbian. She likes being a lesbian. But funny and witty and saucy, and she was great. And then finally, Deborah Ann Wool played a character called Jessica Hamby. And in the very first episode that she's in, she's human, and you see her turned right away. And Bill is kind of forced to turn her because now, of course, there's this international order of vampires, and you find out, as the show goes on, there's this whole hierarchy that you can have no imaginings of. Dennis O'Hare played a vampire within this who was big screaming homosexual, but also hysterically funny. But they said, find someone and turn them. We need more in our ranks. And so he finds this young, innocent teenager and turns her into a vampire, and she's same kind of thing. Rather than kind of coming at it at rage, she kind of starts off as just being kind of broken by the whole experience. So the rape allegory kind of, works there too, but eventually becomes, part of the fabric of this town and this community. And like a lot of these vampire stories, you kind of have this special relationship with the one who turned you. And so she's connected to Bill in a very particular way, but it never got sexual between those. So, like, that was never. It was more of a father-daughter kind of vibe that these two had.
Sire is sometimes used in the movie books. This is your sire. Whoever turned you is your sire. That's kind of like a father or mother figure.
Yeah, and yet sometimes they're lovers. I mean, that happened in Buffy a lot. When you would turn somebody, they would become your. Because didn't Drusilla turn Spike? And then they were lovers for centuries.
Yeah, that may be what happened.
Yeah. So those kind of things can go. But an interesting treatment of vampires in that sense of now they're an allegory. There was always an allegory for something. Now they're an allegory for something else. Particularly the both the queer and the HIV positive kind of communities could see a really strong link between these stories that we're telling here, and it would just become a new way to see this whole thing.
Well, and I think that this whole modern idea of the vampire, suddenly, so there's the Anne Rice books, then there's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, then there's True Blood that was, each one got a little bit more intense as you went on. There was something people were getting out of it because it was very, very popular and continued on. I think it's probably died down a little now in 2017. But, it was still going on at this point in the early 21st century. Yeah. It was still building.
There was a big renaissance. It seemed like vampires were everywhere.
But that's what happens to everything. Westerns will come and go. Yeah. And then sci-fi will come and go.
Yeah. Oh, vamps are coming back. We seem to be in a little bit of a dip right now. We don't see them all. Yes.
That's what's going on. And
exactly.
Again, and interestingly enough, World War II crap is going on right now.
Yeah.
You see a lot of either documentaries or B stories that are taking place.
Well, we just
Dunkirk.
Hunger for the Greatest Generation at a time when we don't see a lot of that.
But that's again, it's I know why, but it's one of those that things go in cycles. And in the early 21st century, late 20th and early 21st, vampires were on the go, and because you were able to metaphorize them, I don't know if that's a word or not, but I think it should be #metaphorize. And thus, people were able to use them in different ways. And show different things, which is what Joss did, which is what Anne did, but also what Charlotte Harris did. But also, what's different is, so she did that for the books, and while the TV show was based on her books, it's really it's its own thing. It's its own universe.
Yeah. So we've got one more vampire story that kind of, was huge.
It brought down the vampire empire.
We're going to take a break, and then we're going to talk about, I don't know what I'm going to say because I have no contact with this series or anything to do with anything, but we'll wing it when we come back.
Thanks for being here.
Open wide. It's your prescribed dose of Popperation with Eric and Stacey.
So if you couldn't guess by our outro into that last break, the next one that we're going to talk about, Stephenie Meyer's Twilight series.
Before dusk.
So she wrote 4 books in the Twilight saga.
Yes.
Twilight, followed by New Moon, followed by Eclipse, followed by Breaking Dawn.
Yeah, I read the first book.
Did you?
I did not read the other books, but I read the first one, and I saw...
I'm sensing you loved it.
Most of the movies. I liked it.
Did you?
I like vampires.
Okay.
I read vampire books.
All right.
And I liked it.
Okay.
That's where I stopped there.
All right. Fair.
So when the movies came out, I went.
Okay.
Here's what I said. Okay. There's 2 paths here. We can go down the path of let's critique the movie itself or critique it, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the vampires. So basically, Stephenie created a new universe. Mm-hmm. So the backstory for these vampires is a little different.
Okay. Explain.
Well, I don't explain too much because I don't remember a whole lot of it. But they sparkled. They sparkled, and you could turn people, but they could go out in the day, light. So there were some of the tropes she didn't keep.
Yep. But they were very pale.
They were very pale. They sparkled in the sun, and they weren't very pretty. Very violent. What this was a story of, and I feel like if we're going to say, okay, you use vampires as an analogy or metaphor, I always get those things confused. That's, this was a coming of age.
Okay.
Of Bella, the girl.
Uh-huh. So yet another human girl in the center of a vampire story, sensing a theme.
And I think that's because these are written, no offense, these romance novels are written for women. Mm-hmm. So your heroine is going to be a human woman because that's who's reading them.
Sure.
And her parents are split up, and she is now going to live with her dad up in, I think it's Washington State.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And
the gloomy, foggy Pacific Northwest.
Which is why the vampires are there, because there's not a lot of direct sun. So they don't have to worry about it. So that's why they're up there.
Clever.
Clever. It's also cheaper to film in Canada.
There you go.
So yeah, so she falls in love with this vampire, falls in love with her. And it's a basic romance thing for a long time. She has a really good friend who we find out later is a werewolf. So you end up with this werewolf vampire girl triangle.
Okay.
But there's really never
echoes of True Blood, because we didn't really talk about this, but there was a whole thing of werewolves in True Blood as well.
Well, and werewolves showed up in Buffy as well. I mean, I think the idea is if you're going to have a universe where there are vampires, you might as well bring in all of the fairy tale stuff.
Yep.
And so there was the vampires and werewolves hated each other, which is what they are wont to do. And so there was that kind of conflict going on. There was the love triangle going on, although it was really never, you always knew she was going to go for the vampire.
Okay.
She was always Team
Well, he sparkled.
He did sparkle, which got a lot of flack after it came out. If you're like, vampires don't sparkle. I'm like, dude, vampires don't exist. So maybe down the whole what they do and don't do. I guess I stopped watching it, and part of it was Kristen Stewart, who played Bella. Mm-hmm. She also met her boyfriend, Edward, what's-his-face?
Yep.
I can't remember his name now.
Robert Pattinson. They met. He was best known before that for his Harry Potter dying in the water thing. Cedric Diggory.
Yeah. I remember that.
Hufflepuff. Pride.
Sure. Thanks. I don't get that. I don't get enough of that at home. We're all Harry Potter, apparently.
Oh.
Yeah, don't even.
I can go there.
Don't even. Each of my daughters is a different house. Just throwing that out.
Okay.
I don't know what that means, but that's what
I can explain it all to you later.
But point of this being, I didn't care for her take on this character. It seemed like a boring character. All she did was look morose or confused. And I was bored. So I watched the first 2 movies. I didn't watch the rest of them.
I have not seen any of the Twilight films. I've heard that criticism of her before. I will say I saw a movie on Netflix. I'd never heard of it, but it showed up, and it was Chloe Grace Moretz, Kristen Stewart, and Juliette Binoche.
Doing what?
In a film called The Clouds of Sils Maria. And Juliette Binoche plays an actress who became famous in a play that she had done years before, where she played the young woman in a love triangle about a man, a young woman, and an older woman. And now they were coming to her saying, we want to remount the play, but we want you to play the older woman this time. Kristen Stewart played her assistant who was helping her learn her lines, and Chloe Grace Moretz played the woman who is now going to be playing the younger woman.
I've heard of this, and Kristen got actually pretty good reviews.
She got a lot of praise and some awards for this. She's very good in this movie. So this could have been a director choice. I have no idea. And editor choice as well, that they said, okay, cut to this shot and don't do anything else. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It affected how I saw it, though. Sure. And I'm not going to argue she was great in these movies, because I've heard lots of... In fact, I pulled a quote. Rolling Stone said about the last film... So there were 5 movies, actually, because they turned Breaking Dawn into Breaking Dawn Part 1 and Part 2. About the 5th and final movie, Breaking Dawn Part 2, he said... You're going to hear a lot about Breaking Dawn Part 2 being the best of the Twilight movies. That's like saying a simple head cold is preferable to swine flu.
Yeah, that's damned with here's what I'm going to say.
I love critics when they're nasty. I understand. They have to see a lot of shit. And so when they do and they're forced to watch it, the poison pen comes out. But it amuses me.
The thing about the Twilight stuff is I think it ran its course before the last movie. People were done, but they had to do Part 2.
And apparently it was the best one.
Yeah, but here's the vampires. Some of them were good, and they were trying to stay good. They would tend to, as vampires are wont to do, if you get hungry and you haven't fed in a while, you tend to get really violent, and it can get bad. So there was a lot, there was a thing about control. They don't always have control over this monster part of them. Again, a lot of this is, that's how people are. You sit there and you say, well, he didn't have control, he couldn't help it. He's a person, he can help it. Yeah. But that was, part of this conflict.
But there's also an interesting allegory to addiction there, maybe. Is that, you might just say, all by yourself, you're not going to get over an addiction to cocaine.
Right.
Like, you can have all the willpower that you can summon, but if there's nothing there, externally to prevent you from doing it, you're going back to the coke or the alcohol or whatever it is that you're addicted to. So, just as you kind of look at these fictional creatures and try to glean some lessons about them from life, addiction might be an interesting way to kind of go with that.
The thing about the Twilight thing is she created a different universe in that there were things that these vampires could do that others in the past haven't been able to, and vice versa. So
I can't get over the sparkle. I've never heard that before.
Here's the thing. It was a fun story, I think. And I think the books, they also got even thicker. Every new book was like thicker than the one before. So honestly, that's why I read one. And it, I just
getting paid by the page.
I can't commit to that. But I think it was a fine universe. It was obviously people wanted that. They enjoyed that universe because of the characters and that sort of thing. At the same time, as I said, in a way, they kind of killed it in that we haven't done more vampires after that. That kind of True Blood stopped the show. There are no more Twilights. We're kind of out of the vampire thing now. And because I think we really, really overindulged. We had a lot of vampires.
There was a whole lot going on.
At the same time.
Yeah.
But as I said, I think that...
Early 21st century, it was like the thing.
Yeah. And I think it's fine But I think it's going to be some time when someone comes up with a new take on it for it to be interesting again. And I think that Twilight did that with her sparkly and some of the other things, again, that they could do that others couldn't in their backstory. But myself, if I have to do a final diagnosis or something about this, I would say my favorite is what Joss Whedon did. One reason I do like him a lot, and it was funny. I like the humor that he involved in there, but I also liked how he used the monsters, vampires and others again, but vampires mostly, to symbolize other things that people, human beings, teenagers specifically, but usually other people as well, have to deal with. And I think we like them because they're dark and they're sexy, and you like that. You want to be bad every once in a while. It makes you feel kind of fun, but then you also want to have that control. Yeah. So I think that they pull us to that part of us. Yeah.
I think my final diagnosis on vampires is, maybe in this day and age, maybe superheroes are a big thing because we just want them in our lives.
We feel like we need
them. It would be nice if somebody could swoop in from the sky in a big red cape and save the world.
Please.
When vampires are big, I think it is that time when we feel a little safer, and so we might want to indulge our dark side a little bit. And so maybe that's why they're in a dip right now, and we're not really doing a whole lot of that.
Because we've got enough dangerous happening.
But all of those things that scare us, but it was just out in the middle, huge, big, huge hit.
Yes.
Scary clown, because clowns are creepy. But this idea that, it is the sex appeal, because when you look at Pennywise the clown, scary, not sexy.
Correct.
Frankenstein monster has never been depicted as sexy. No. Wolfman, bestial, but not. So usually a sexy man before the full moon comes out,
right? But not. But then
full monster. But then you're just pure scary. The Mummy, ew. Nothing sexy about that. Vampires, ooh.
Yeah.
There's this whole sense of, and so as I look at,
but there's also a control that vampires have that all of those other monsters you mentioned don't have.
Yeah.
When you're in full wolf mode, the beast is all primal. There is no humanness.
Yeah.
Vampires tend to still have that facade.
Yes, but it's a facade, right? That's what makes them scary, is that they're inhuman monsters on the inside, but the outside they can present as someone who's even classy.
Correct.
They can be sexy in all kinds of ways, depending on what sexy is to you. So, happy Halloween, everyone. If you're dressing up as a vampire tonight, I hope you get a little nookie, because everyone needs a little nookie. You suck. I see what you did there. I see what you did right there.
I'm so funny.
You've been listening to Popperation with Eric and Stacey. Check out our website at popperationroom.com for links to our blog and other extras. Don't forget to subscribe to Popperation via iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, and other podcast locations. You can also follow at Popperation Room on Facebook and Twitter. Music provided by purpleplanet.com.